What's up everybody on YouTube? AJ Rush back to discuss another video, and today we're going to be talking about what we learned from NFL Week 8. Alright guys, so we're now at the point where I like to say that we're getting a good barometer on how good teams are going to be and things of that nature, and some of the contenders and some of the teams that we're going to be seeing late in the postseason. We can start projecting and stuff like that. But before we get into this recap and talk about what we learned from this week of the NFL football, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. Make sure you hit that like button. I post videos about sports, lifestyle, and pop culture. So with that being said, let's get into NFL Week 8. The first game, of course, that took place on Thursday night was a matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buffalo Bills were able to win 24-18 on a pretty solid game, I would say, from Josh Allen. Completed 31 of his 40 passing attempts, throwing for 324 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Baker Mayfield on the other side had completed 25 of his 42 passing attempts, throwing for 237 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And really just an overall defensive battle, but also a game where the Bills were ultimately able to edge the Buccaneers out because they are overall the better team. The Bills were struggling, of course, after losing to the Patriots in Week 7, but it was overall a good win for them, and now the Buccaneers are 3-4. Have lost currently 3 in a row after losing to the Lions, the Falcons, and now the Bills. If they want to win the NFC South and try to make a playoff push, they for sure got to start getting some wins up after losing these previous 3. And for the Bills, we expect more out of them for sure. They are now 5-3 overall. Maybe they can get some type of rhythm going in, playing better football in the weeks ahead, because the AFC is loaded, as we know. And they also just signed Leonard Fournette, who of course was on the Buccaneers for a few seasons with Tom Brady winning that Super Bowl. So we'll see what his running game is able to add to the Bills offense, because we know that they're Josh Allen oriented on the rushing end, but that'll be a solid addition to them in the backfield, also with Cook. Let's get into honestly an ugly game that also went into overtime. The Battle of New York between the New York Jets and the New York Giants. The Jets were able to win on a field goal, 13-10. And really, we don't have to spend too much time on this game. Zach Wilson, I would say, he played a solid performance. His completion percentage wasn't really the best. He completed 17 out of his 36 passing attempts for 240 passing yards and 1 touchdown. Also ran the ball a little bit, but nothing too crazy. Garrett Wilson had a really good game, had 7 receptions and 100 yards. Tyrod Taylor also left the game early with a rib injury, praying that he's okay. So not really surprised by this result. The Giants did have a lot of opportunities to win the game, but did fall short. Saquon Barkley had 36 carries, which is insane, almost 40 carries. That is bananas to me, for 128 rushing yards. And next week in Week 9, Daniel Jones is expected to return. They are now 2-6. I mean, what are you really playing for at this point? Because the NFC East and really just their playoff chances in general are slipping away from them. So only time will tell with them. And the Jets, they're just remaining steady. And Aaron Rodgers was on the field getting passes up again before the game. Not necessarily like training wise, but he was even like moving a little bit. It's crazy to see how fast his recovery has been. So there's some hopes for the Jets. I mean, if they can stay poised and potentially be a wild card in the AFC, anything's possible. Another game we have to talk about is the Jacksonville Jaguars beating the Pittsburgh Steelers 20-10. The Jaguars are now 6-2 and the Steelers are now 4-3. Jaguars, they have been playing really impressive football ever since they lost that game against the Texans. They had those games overseas and they really got in a good rhythm. So shout outs to them. Trevor Lawrence had 292 passing yards, completed 24 of his 32 passing attempts for a touchdown and 1 interception. Travis Etienne had 79 rushing yards, and Evan Ingram had 88 receiving yards. And Kenny Pickett left the game early. Only time will tell if he's able to return in Week 9, but we're not sure yet. Mitchell Trubisky came in his place, and of course he played like how you thought he would, threw 2 interceptions, only had 1 touchdown, and ultimately that was the biggest difference. And of course the Steelers have a stout defense, but if you can't score on offense, you're going to get beat, especially against a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars. Next game was a low-key shootout between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. The Eagles were able to win by a touchdown, winning 38-31, and now have a 7-1 record overall, and now the Commanders are 3-5. And the Commanders, they were up 14-3 in this game earlier in the first half, but the Eagles were able to respond and play a good brand of football. Jalen Hurts completed 29 out of his 38 passing attempts for 319 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. AJ Brown had his 6th straight 125 plus receiving yard game, had 8 receptions for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, and just balling. Honestly, I think he's a top candidate for offensive player of the year. Him and Tyreek Hill have for sure been the best receivers this season so far, I would say. And I understand people putting AJ Brown in the MVP conversation, but honestly, nowadays, if we're being real, that's really just a quarterback oriented award. But the Eagles are looking good, and they're going to be in a great matchup against the Dallas Cowboys in Week 9, so that's going to be something to look forward to. And on the other end with the Washington Commanders, Sam Howell, he really had a really good performance. Completed 39 out of his 52 passing attempts for 397 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. Was really impressed by him. Jahan Dotson also had 8 receptions for 108 receiving yards and a touchdown. So the Commanders, I mean, I don't know. We know they have Eric Bieniemy as the offense coordinator now, but I really don't know if Ron Rivera is going to be the head coach after this year. I mean, it sucks to say that, but if we're just being real and looking at it how it is. Keeping things in the NFC East, we'll talk about the Dallas Cowboys, who really just dominated the Los Angeles Rams from the start of the game, winning the game 43-20. The Dallas Cowboys now have a 5-2 record overall, and the Rams are now 3-5. The Cowboys, they really had a great performance offensively and defensively. Of course, Micah Parsons forced a fumble, had some sacks, just playing really good, one of the best defensive players in the league, we know that. But Dak Prescott had a really good game as well, completed 25 out of his 31 passing attempts, had 304 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. CeeDee Lamb had a great game, had 12 receptions, 158 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. They're starting to get him more involved, which we all know he's a #1 receiver for Dallas Cowboys. They just had to include him more in the offense, and Mike McCarthy as a play caller had to make things more creative, and it looked like they did that against the Rams. We'll see if they are able to do that against the Philadelphia Eagles and other teams in the following weeks. And also they got Brandon Cooks involved more, as he scored a touchdown as well. He's been getting more involved in the past few weeks, being his first year in Dallas. And on the other end with the Rams, Matthew Stafford left the game early. He did have 162 passing yards, a touchdown, and interception, but they really just weren't clicking throughout the game. And of course you can credit that to the Dallas Cowboys defense. Darion Bland had his 3rd pick 6 of the year, picking off Matthew Stafford as well. So the Cowboys, they definitely look good. And like I said about that matchup a second ago against the Eagles in week 9, it's going to be really good. We're going to see where the Cowboys are at, especially in their last big game against the 49ers. They laid an egg. So we know that Dak Prescott usually plays good against the Eagles, but we'll see. It's going to be a really good performance. And there's a lot of good games in week 9 as well, but that's going to be one at the top of the list for sure. Next game is a devastating one in terms of Kirk Cousins towards Achilles, praying that he is able to recover from that. And really, he had a positive attitude going off of the field. And Kirk Cousins, I think he was having arguably his best season of his career at the age of 35, and we know he's going to be a free agent next year, so it's going to be interesting to see where he winds up, because if the Vikings wanted him, they would have extended him. So yeah, but with that being said, the Vikings were able to beat the Green Bay Packers 24-10. They now have a 4-4 record overall, and now with Justin Jefferson coming back in the next couple of weeks, it's interesting to see with the trade deadline looming. Are they going to make a move for a solid quarterback to try and make a playoff run and be a wild card maybe? They were losing a lot earlier in the year, but they are able to catch back up and be 500 now, so that's going to be interesting to see. On the other end with the Green Bay Packers, man, it's tough because Jordan Love was playing good the first few weeks of the season, and really he's just declined ever since. Don't know what to do there. Heard a lot of people saying that they may just try to get another quarterback and move on. Of course, this is his first year as a full-time starter, which sucks to say it from that perspective, but Green Bay, they aren't used to having trash seasons like this, and if they continue to lose, that'll be 2 subpar seasons in a row. A really good game that we can talk about next is a matchup between the Tennessee Titans and the Atlanta Falcons. The Titans won this game 28-23. Before I talk about the Falcons real quick, shout out to Will Levis, man. Drafted in the 2nd round, was talked about as one of the best quarterbacks in the 2023 draft, but slipped in the draft because people thought he had character issues, but persevered, and he got his shot with the Titans on Sunday. And I think that they should just keep him as a starter for the rest of the year, and honestly shouldn't think about it twice. Completed 19 out of his 29 passing attempts, threw for 238 passing yards and 4 touchdowns in those clean throwback Oilers uniforms. Being from Houston, I'm not a Texans fan, but it does feel criminal to see those uniforms not in Houston. But anyways, man, Will Levis, he played really good, and we knew this out of him. He's a strong quarterback, has potential to be really accurate and dominant. I think Tennessee should just ride it out with him and see where things go. Because Malik Willis, I mean, they did draft him in 2022, but he's not really that good of a passer. His game is more predicated on athleticism, but Will Levis can give you the best of both worlds and stand in the pocket. And then moving on from that, though, Derrick Henry had 22 carries, 101 rushing yards. DeAndre Hopkins had a really great game, probably his best game with the Titans so far. Actually, easily his best game with the Titans so far. Had 4 receptions for 128 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. So that was a really good win for the Titans. And then in terms of the Falcons, Taylor Heineke came in for the game, came in for Desmond Ridder in the second half. They said that he was dealing with concussion protocol or something like that, but I don't know. I think a lot of people on the Falcons probably wanted Taylor Heineke to play because Desmond Ridder, he's been so up and down, and a lot of people feel like he's been holding the Falcons back. And now they have a 4-4 record. They still have a chance at their division in NFC South, but only time will tell to see where they go. This outcome between the Dolphins and the Patriots really wasn't surprising. The Dolphins won the game 31-17. They now have a 6-2 record, and now the Patriots are 2-6. We know the Patriots, they had a good win against Buffalo in week 7, but the Dolphins, they're on another level in my opinion, even though they did lose to Buffalo earlier in the year. But Tua Tagovailoa had a really good game, completed 30 out of his 45 passing attempts, had 324 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Jalen Waddle also had a really good game, had 7 receptions, 121 receiving yards, and a touchdown. The Dolphins, we recognize them as being arguably the best team in the AFC, and they have a really great matchup against the Chiefs next week in Germany in week 9. That's going to be a really good game, and we're going to talk about the Chiefs in a few because they had a bad loss, I would say, against the Broncos, but that's going to be a really good game. Like I said, there's a lot of good games in week 9. I mentioned earlier, of course, the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles, then the Chiefs and the Dolphins, and then also the Bills and the Bengals. We can fly through this one. The New Orleans Saints beat the Indianapolis Colts 38-27. Not really too surprising about the Saints winning this game. Derek Carr had a pretty good performance, completed 19 out of his 27 passing attempts, 310 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Gardner Minshew, on the other hand, he had an okay performance. He completed 23 out of his 41 passing attempts, 213 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. It does suck for the Colts that Anthony Richardson is out for the year, but this can only help help them going forward, and they can have a better idea and plan for keeping him healthy. Of course, he's an athletic quarterback, but you also have to protect him as well. But the Saints, I'm not surprised by them winning this game. Of course, they have one of the better defenses in the league. Rashid Shaheed also had 3 receptions for 153 receiving yards and a touchdown. That's really impressive, having 3 receptions for that much yardage and a touchdown. That's crazy. But the Saints, just like the Falcons, just like the Buccaneers, they have an equal chance to win the NFC South. Speaking about another team in the NFC South, the Carolina Panthers were finally able to get their first win against the Houston Texans, winning 15-13 on the last second field goal. The Panthers are now a whopping 1-6, and the Texans are now 3-4. It was a really good win for the Panthers, and in terms of the Panthers' confidence, and of course in Bryce Young and things of that nature, that's really good because he had a pretty good game, I would say. Completed 22 out of his 31 passing attempts, had 235 passing yards and a touchdown. So shout out to Bryce Young for winning that game, the first overall pick. I think CJ Stroud, who's been playing better than Bryce Young for sure throughout this season, he had a mediocre game, I would say. He completed 16 out of his 24 passing attempts, but also had 140 passing yards. I mean, their offense wasn't really able to click at all in terms of the Texans. And it's a bad loss for them for sure because they could have been 4-4, but now are 3-4, under 500. But they still have a chance to be competitive, and I still wouldn't be surprised if the Texans have around 6, 7, 8, or maybe even 9 wins this year. But I would probably predict 8. This is a game that really could have gone either way, in my opinion. The Seahawks were able to beat the Cleveland Browns 24-20. Seahawks now have a 5-2 record, and it's crazy to say, but now in the NFC West, they own the best record in that division, and they're currently first. We're gonna talk about the 49ers in a few, trust me. But shout out to the Seahawks. Geno Smith completed 23 out of his 37 passing attempts for 254 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So I would say an up and down game for Geno, but they were able to get the win, and that's the statistic that matters the most. So that's good for the Seahawks for sure. Tyler Lockett had 81 receiving yards on 8 receptions and had a touchdown. On the other end, PJ Walker. Of course, we're not expecting too much out of him because Deshaun Watson is the one that's expected to play. He's still dealing with that lingering injury, and PJ Walker had 2 interceptions. Of course, we know the Browns defense with Jim Schwartz in there as defensive coordinator is dominant, but you can only do so much when your offense can't score. But both of these teams, they for sure, I think, will make the playoffs. The Cleveland Browns, they're in the tough AFC North. All those teams are over 500, but I still think that they'll make the playoffs potentially. It just depends on where the rest of the AFC goes, I guess. But it's going to be interesting to see where they fall, of course, with Deshaun Watson. And then also the Seahawks, they're playing really good football, and those clean blue uniforms, I like those. So shout out to them, and that was a really good win for them. Another 2 teams that are ironically in the AFC North in the NFC West was a matchup between the Cincinnati Bengals and the San Francisco 49ers, and the Bengals were able to win 31-17. This gave the 49ers their 3rd straight loss in a row, now falling to 5-3, and like I mentioned, they're now 2nd in the NFC West. Crazy to say that. Brock Purdy really struggled in this game. He had 2 interceptions, had 365 yards, but 2 interceptions that really cost him when you look at the rest of the game. And then Joe Burrow on the other end is really starting to get his rhythm back after dealing with that little lingering calf injury. He completed 28 out of his 32 passing attempts, only had 4 incompletions, had 283 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Jamar Chase, of course, 7-11, like he says, always open, had 10 receptions for 100 yards and 1 touchdown. Bengals are really getting back in their rhythm in the AFC. I mean, we expected them. For some reason, they always start off slow, but at the end of the day, I mean, if you can get your rhythm in throughout the season and get back to being dominant, that's what matters the most. And with the 49ers, that defense hasn't been playing up to expectations after starting off 5-0. I still think that they'll be okay and at the top of the NFC, but they got to get some wins back on the board. They got to kill this losing streak because that's very alarming. This game, man, I know it was tough for Chiefs fans to watch this one. The Denver Broncos really dominated the Chiefs 24-9. Patrick Mahomes wasn't able to throw a single touchdown. I don't think I've seen that throughout his career. It was really a pedestrian performance, and a lot of people were saying that he was sick. I mean, if so, that's true, but I mean, he still plays, so we're not going to give him that excuse. And with that being said, the Chiefs are still 6-2, but I think that it is definitely a bad loss. Of course, going into the Week 9 game next week against the Dolphins, they're going to have to play up for that matchup, and they probably overlooked the Denver Broncos, of course, being 2-5 at the time, and now 3-5 after this win. That defense really played great after playing bad so far this season. Of course, we know that they infamously gave up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins earlier in the season, but the Broncos, I mean, they dominated on the defensive end for sure, and Russell Wilson made some key plays. He didn't have to play too crazy because he only had 114 passing yards. He did have 3 touchdowns. So that was good for them, but the Broncos defense, they really dominated, and that was a good sign for the Broncos for sure. We can see if they're able to be like the Vikings potentially and get some wins back in and maybe try to compete for a wild card spot in the AFC, but I don't know. That's a tall task in my eyes, but anything is possible. And with the Chiefs, man, I think that they'll still be fine, but they are very reliant on Travis Kelce. Let's be real. The trade deadline is looming. Are they going to make any more moves to try to get some more wide receiver help? The Ravens, they were able to get a solid win against the Arizona Cardinals. They, of course, dominated the Detroit Lions in a week prior in Week 7, winning that game 38-6, and they won this game against the Cardinals 31-24. A way closer matchup. We have to give credit to the Arizona Cardinals because every game they played in this season, of course, they have a 1-7 record, but they have been close. They have been fighting for sure. No one expects them to really be good, and Kyler Murray is expected to return later in the year, but they've been competing, and that's the one thing that you can respect for sure. Lamar Jackson, he didn't have the best performance, but they were still able to get the win. Like I said, he had 150 157 passing yards and a touchdown. Gus Edwards had 3 touchdowns, so that's really impressive from him. But overall, I would say that it was a good performance for the Ravens just to get the win. Being 6-2 now, their defense has been playing good, but the Ravens, they're playing really good football. I think that this is a team that we expect to potentially do great things. The Ravens, they could really make a good playoff push in the AFC this year. And of course, we know how dynamic of a quarterback Lamar Jackson is, not only with his running, but how more impressive he has been as a passer this year too. This Sunday night football game was one that I don't know why it was on primetime football. They need to stop putting people like the Bears and the Raiders on national TV, because the Raiders, of course, they're on Monday Night Football, and like, why, bro? But anyways, the Chargers were able to win this game easily, winning 30-13. I watched a little of it and fell asleep on it because, I mean, this was an expected outcome. The Chargers now have a 3-4 record overall, and the Chicago Bears are now 2-6. Of course, Justin Fields didn't play in this game because he's still dealing with that little hand injury. Talking about the Chargers, really, that's the main focus in this game. They need to start getting wins for sure if they want to be an AFC wildcard team. Justin Herbert had 298 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, completing 31 out of his 40 passing attempts. So that's really good for the Chargers. I mean, it was a good win, one that they, of course, should have had. Really, that you could have marked as a win before the game started on Sunday. The final game of NFL Week 8 took place between the Detroit Lions and the Las Vegas Raiders. Not a surprising outcome again. The Detroit Lions won 26-14. It was a little close in the third quarter, especially when Jared Goff threw that pick 6 to Marcus Peters. But after that, the Lions were able to open things up and get away with the win. And there's a lot of drama in Las Vegas in terms of Jimmy Garoppolo not being able to target Davante Adams properly. And I don't blame Davante Adams for being frustrated, but at the end of the day, you did decide to go there. I know that he wanted to play with Derek Carr, but that only lasted for 1 year. But I mean, it was still his decision to go there. And the trade deadline is about to come today at the time of this recording. So I'm not really seeing a reality where he's traded today on Halloween, but I think that this will definitely be Davante Adams' last season in Las Vegas. And then talking about the Lions, like I said, they're a top 3 to 4 team in the NFC, so this is a game that they were expected to win. Jared Goff, he had a pretty good game besides the interception, completed 26 out of his 37 passing attempts for 272 passing yards and a touchdown. And Jahmyr Gibbs, he had a really great game, had 26 carries for 152 rushing yards and a touchdown. So guys, talking about the things that we learned from NFL Week 8, there's a ton of loaded Eagles next week. Of course, you have the Chiefs up there despite their loss to the Broncos. You have the Dolphins, you have the Jaguars, who I believe have won 5 in a row, and now we're 6-2. The Bills are still up there for sure. There's a lot of good teams in the NFC too. You still have the Eagles, who are 7-1 now, the Lions, and then still the 49ers, but they need to get stuff going, like I said, because losing 3 games in a row is unacceptable. I think right now you can't possibly have them as a top 5 team, but they can still get back up there. And even to an extent, the Cowboys, they had a really good win against the Rams, and if they're able to beat you for sure have to put them as one of the best teams in the league, but only time will tell with that. There's a lot of things going on, and of course the trade deadline is today, the day of this recording, October 31st. Happy Halloween. I'm probably not going to be able to report everything that happens because of the timing of this video, and I want to get it out because we are recapping ultimately what happened from Week 8. And if any big trades happen, I'll probably get into that on my Week 9 recap for sure. But I don't really see anything that's going to change the NFL happening on the trade deadline today, but anything's possible. So if there is, I'll talk about it on the next recap. But yeah, what we learned from this week is that there's a lot of parity for sure in both conferences to an extent. And if anything, it's a beautiful thing going into Week 9. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I have for this video. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe and turn on post notifications. I post videos about sports, lifestyle, and pop culture. More videos are on the way, guys. Hope y'all are being blessed and doing well. I appreciate the support always, and y'all have a good one. Okay, guys, I was just about to get done posting my video, like uploading it to YouTube. Bro, freaking Chase Young got traded to the 49ers, and it would have been probably quicker for me to do a voiceover, but that's insane, dog. I'm not going to lie. That does help their defense, especially after losing 3 games in a row. In the NFC, too, man, that's wild. Let me know what y'all think about that. But, yeah, guys, that's crazy. Man, trade deadline, wow. That's wild.